let's cut straight to it. You're not dumb, you're not weak, you're not broken, you're a good person. But here's the truth, being a good person doesn't keep you out of a bad relationship. In fact, sometimes it's exactly why you stay. You're loyal, you're hopeful, you want to believe people can change. But I'm going to ask you something tough. Are you confusing patience with self-betrayal? Here's the deal. Bad relationships don't just steal your happiness, they train you to accept less than you deserve. You keep telling yourself it'll get better, that they'll come around, that if you love them enough, they'll finally love you right. But what's actually happening? You're slowly disappearing. The fear of starting over is one of the most powerful forces that keeps good people trapped in bad relationships. It's not that they don't see the cracks in the foundation or the dysfunction in the daily reality, they do. But the thought of leaving and starting fresh feels like staring into a dark, endless hallway with no light on the other side. People tell themselves, at least I know what I have here. Even if what I have is disappointment, arguments, or emotional neglect, it still feels familiar. And as human beings, we are wired to prefer the familiar over the unknown, even when the familiar hurts us. This fear of the unknown convinces people to settle because the idea of beginning again feels like too high of a price to pay. Think about it when someone has invested years, maybe even decades into a relationship. The idea of starting over feels like throwing away a life's worth of effort. They've built routines together, shared holidays, made memories, maybe even raised children. Their lives are woven together in ways that don't easily unravel. So the brain starts whispering lies to keep them stuck. What if I never find anyone else? What if I end up alone? What if this is as good as it gets? That's fear talking, not truth. But because fear speaks so loudly in the silence of doubt, many people convince themselves to stay where they are, even when every sign is pointing toward the exit. Another layer of this fear is tied to identity. People begin to wonder, who am I without this relationship? When you've been with someone long enough, especially in adulthood, your sense of self often gets intertwined with them. You know who you are in the context of that relationship. You're their partner, their spouse, they're confident. Leaving means you have to redefine yourself, and that's scary. It means facing questions about your worth, your future, and whether you can build something new without the other person. The truth is, those questions don't go away by staying. They just get buried under layers of compromise and denial. The fear of starting over also has practical roots. It's not just emotional, it's logistical. People worry about where they'll live, how they'll support themselves financially, what will happen to shared responsibilities like kids or bills. These are real concerns, not imaginary ones. But here's the critical part. These concerns become excuses that mask the deeper issue, which is self-doubt. Plenty of people have rebuilt their lives after leaving relationships that were no longer serving them. They found new homes, established new routines, and discovered strength they didn't know they had. The problem isn't that starting over is impossible. It's that the fear convinces you that you won't survive it. Here's what many don't realize. Staying in a bad relationship out of fear is still a choice. And that choice comes with its own cost. You pay in daily frustration and diminished self-respect in wasted potential. You pay in nights lying awake wondering why you don't feel loved the way you want to, but you keep quiet because you're afraid of rocking the boat. You pay in silence when you swallow your needs just to keep the peace. The fear of starting over doesn't eliminate pain. It just trades the pain of uncertainty for the pain of stagnation. And over time, stagnation can become its own kind of slow death. People often think starting over means starting from zero, like wiping the slate clean and losing everything they've built. But the truth is, you're not starting from zero, you're starting from experience. Everything you've learned, all the lessons you've carried, even the mistakes you've made, come with you into the next chapter. You're wiser now, more aware, more prepared to make choices that align with your values. Starting over isn't erasing your past, it's using your past to build a future that actually fits you. One of the biggest lies fear tells is that time already spent makes it too late to change. But ask yourself, if you're already unhappy today, does adding 5 more years of the same make it better, or does it just leave you with even more regret? Time is going to pass whether you stay or whether you go. The question is whether you're going to use that time to keep living the same story or whether you're going to be brave enough to write a new one. And here's the truth that fear doesn't want you to see. You've already survived worse than starting over. Think back to other moments in your life when you thought you couldn't handle change, losing a job, moving cities, graduating school, maybe even losing loved ones. You didn't crumble, you adapted, you found a way. Starting over in a relationship is no different. The pain of leaving is temporary. The regret of staying is permanent. Good people stay in bad relationships because fear convinces them that the unknown is worse than what they already know. But if you zoom out, you'll see that the unknown is where growth lives, where new love lives, where peace lives. Fear will tell you to cling to the familiar, but courage will tell you that starting over is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of the part where you finally stop abandoning yourself. Hope for change is one of the strongest chains that keeps good people locked in bad relationships. It sounds noble, it sounds compassionate, it even sounds like love. You see the potential in the person you're with, and you convince yourself that if you just give them time, if you just love them hard enough, if you're patient and understanding, they'll eventually become the partner you know they could be. On the surface, that seems admirable. After all, everyone deserves grace, right? But here's the brutal truth: potential doesn't pay the bills of emotional connection. Potential doesn't comfort you at night. Potential doesn't show up consistently. And if all you're holding on to is potential, then you're not in a relationship, you're in a waiting game. When you stay because you hope someone will change, you're essentially gambling with your emotional well-being. You're betting that tomorrow will be better, that the promises they've made will finally be kept, that the good moments you've tasted will become the norm. And yes, sometimes people do change, but most of the time what you see consistently is who they are. Not who they might become, not who they are on their best day, but who they are right now. And if right now doesn't meet your needs, then hope becomes a trap. Good people are especially vulnerable to this because they don't want to give up on someone. They believe in forgiveness, second chances, in the power of love to transform. They replay the highlight reel of the relationship in their heads, the sweet words, the passionate nights, the promises of, "I'll do better." And each time their partner stumbles or hurts them, they use that hope like glue to patch over the cracks. They tell themselves it's just a phase, or they're stressed, that's why they're acting this way, or if I can just be more supportive, they'll finally rise to the occasion. What they don't realize is that they're building their life on hypotheticals instead of reality. Hope becomes dangerous when it blinds you to patterns. If someone has apologized for the same behavior 10 times and nothing has changed, you're not dealing with a lack of awareness, you're dealing with a lack of commitment. But when you're invested in their potential, you ignore the evidence in front of you because you're addicted to the idea of what could be. It's like standing in a desert holding a glass of water and convincing yourself it's going to rain soon. You keep waiting, you keep believing, and in the meantime, you're dehydrating. There's also a deeper psychological reason why hope for change can be so intoxicating. When your partner does give you those small crumbs of progress, a sweet gesture after an argument, a few weeks of good behavior, a promise whispered late at night, it triggers your brain's reward system. You get just enough of a taste of the partner you want them to be that it keeps you hooked waiting for more. This cycle is very similar to addiction. You're not addicted to the bad treatment, you're addicted to the intermittent rewards. And because they're inconsistent, you chase them harder, hoping the next time will finally stick. But here's the cost while you're busy waiting for someone else to grow. Your own growth is put on hold. You sacrifice your standards, you shrink your boundaries, you silence your needs. You become so focused on who they could be that you forget who you are. And every day you compromise in the name of hope, you send yourself the message that your needs are negotiable, that your worth is tied to someone else's progress. That's not love. That's self-abandonment wrapped in the language of patience. It's not that hope is bad. Hope is essential for life, but hope has to be tied to evidence. If someone consistently shows effort, consistently follows through, consistently demonstrates growth, then hope is a healthy motivator. But if the only evidence you have is words, broken promises, or temporary improvement, then hope has become denial. Denial disguised as optimism is still denial. And denial keeps you chained to a version of the relationship that only exists in your imagination. The other danger of hoping for change is that it shifts all the responsibility onto you. You start to believe that if you love harder, if you communicate better, if you're more patient, then they'll transform. You make their growth your job. But here's the truth. You can't outlove someone's unwillingness to change. You can't out-patient someone's refusal to take responsibility. You can't out-sacrifice someone's lack of effort. Change is a personal decision. It belongs to them, not you. So ask yourself, what are you actually holding on to? The relationship you're living in today, or the dream of what you hope it could become? If the only thing keeping you there is the idea of a future version of your partner, then you're not in love with reality, you're in love with fantasy. And fantasies don't build healthy relationships. The hardest part about breaking free from this hope trap is admitting that you can't keep investing in who someone might become at the cost of who you are right now. You deserve to be loved in the present tense, not the future tense. You deserve to be with someone whose actions match their words, whose growth isn't just promised but practiced. Hope for change feels like loyalty, but often it's just fear in disguise, fear of letting go, fear of admitting you can't fix them, fear of starting over. But the truth is letting go doesn't mean you've given up on them. It means you finally stopped giving up on yourself. Low self-worth is one of the most silent but destructive reasons good people stay in bad relationships. It doesn't scream loudly like abuse or betrayal. It works quietly, almost invisibly, whispering thoughts into your mind that convince you to settle. When someone doesn't believe they are worthy of healthy love, they unconsciously start negotiating with themselves. This is the best I can get. I should be grateful anyone even wants me. Maybe I don't deserve more. These thoughts don't show up overnight. They are often the result of years of conditioning, childhood experiences, past relationships, cultural messages, all stacking up to form an internal story that says you're not enough. And once that story takes hold, it becomes very difficult to leave a relationship, no matter how toxic it is. Low self-worth distorts reality. It convinces you to interpret your partner's bad behavior as a reflection of their own inadequacy instead of their lack of integrity. If they ignore you, you think, maybe I'm too needy. If they criticize you, you think, maybe I really am the problem. If they withdraw, you wonder, maybe I'm not lovable enough to keep their attention. Instead of looking at their actions objectively, you filter everything through a lens of self-doubt. That lens doesn't just blur the truth, it erases your ability to demand better. This is why people with low self-worth often confuse crumbs of attention with a feast. If you don't believe you deserve consistent love, then even the smallest gestures feel like evidence that you're lucky to have what you have. A partner who occasionally says something kind or does something thoughtful becomes a reason to stay. Even if the rest of the relationship is filled with neglect or pain, the logic becomes, I don't deserve perfect, so I'll take what I can get. That mindset is the prison cell, and self-worth is the missing key. It's also important to understand how low self-worth interacts with fear. When you don't feel good enough, the idea of leaving feels terrifying because deep down you think you won't find anyone else who wants you. You imagine being alone forever, you picture rejection waiting around every corner. That fear is magnified by your own inner critic, the voice that says, see, this is why you should stay. You'll never do better. And the more you listen to that voice, the more powerless you feel. But here's the truth, low self-worth doesn't mean you actually are unworthy. It just means you've internalized the wrong beliefs. Somewhere along the way, you started treating someone else's treatment of you as the measure of your value. Maybe it was parents who were inconsistent with their love. Maybe it was an early partner who chipped away at your confidence. Maybe it was years of being told not to expect too much. Whatever the source, those old stories are now shaping your current choices. And unless you confront them, you will keep replaying them in every relationship you enter. Low self-worth also explains why people tolerate disrespect. When you don't see yourself as valuable, you don't enforce boundaries because boundaries require the belief that you are worth protecting. Instead, you rationalize an excuse. They didn't mean it. They were just stressed. Everyone has flaws. And while all those statements may hold some truth, they become dangerous when they're used to justify a pattern of mistreatment. The reality is, when you value yourself, you stop making excuses for people who don't. But if your self-worth is fragile, you cling to those excuses because the alternative, acknowledging that you deserve more, feels too painful to face. The tragic irony is that many good people who stay in bad relationships are actually incredibly strong in other areas of life. They may be accomplished in their careers, dependable friends, caring family members. But when it comes to love, that internal story of unworthiness sabotages them. They can see other people's value clearly, but they can't extend the same clarity to themselves. This is why friends on the outside often say, I don't understand why you're with them. You could do so much better. They can see the gap between who you are and what you're settling for. But when your self-worth is low, you can't. Building self-worth isn't about arrogance or pretending you're perfect. It's about grounding yourself in the truth that you are inherently valuable, regardless of how anyone else treats you. It means recognizing that love isn't something you earn by being good enough. It's something you choose to give and receive with someone who respects and cherishes you. When you believe that, you stop bargaining with your dignity just to keep someone around. Here's the harsh but freeing reality. Staying in a relationship where you are undervalued is not loyalty. It's proof that you don't yet believe in your own worth. The day you start to see your value clearly is the day the excuses lose their power. You won't tolerate being ignored. You won't rationalize cruelty. You won't cling to potential. You'll look at your partner's behavior and say, this doesn't align with who I am or what I deserve. And that simple shift changes everything. Low self-worth is the anchor keeping many people tied to relationships that drain them. But anchors can be lifted. It begins with awareness, catching the lies you've been telling yourself about your worth, and replacing them with truth. You are not too much. You are not too needy. You are not unlovable. You are a whole human being with value. And the relationship you're in should reflect that, not contradict it. Until you believe this deeply, you'll always risk mistaking survival for love. But once you do, you'll never settle for less than respect, consistency, and care again. Emotional investment is one of the heaviest anchors that keeps good people tied to bad relationships. When you've poured your heart, your time, and your energy into someone, walking away doesn't feel like just leaving a person. It feels like betraying your own effort. You look back at the years you've spent together, the memories you've made, the struggles you've endured, and you think, I can't just throw all that away. That thought becomes the trap. Instead of asking whether the relationship is healthy today, You keep replaying everything you've already given, as if your past investment should dictate your future choices. This is what psychologists call the sunk cost fallacy. It's the idea that because you've already invested so much, whether it's years' love or sacrifices, you have to stick with it, even if it's not working. People do this with money, careers, and yes, relationships. You think, if I leave now, it will mean all of it was for nothing. So you stay, not because it's good, but because you don't want to face the pain of admitting that all your effort didn't create the outcome you hoped for. The irony is, the more you stay, the more you keep adding to that investment, which makes it even harder to leave later. It's a vicious cycle. Good people especially fall into this trap because they're loyal. They value commitment. They don't quit when things get hard. And those are admirable traits when applied to a healthy relationship where both partners are equally invested. But when you're the only one putting in consistent effort, your loyalty becomes a leash. You end up carrying the weight of the relationship on your shoulders, convincing yourself that if you just keep giving, eventually it will balance out. You tell yourself, we've come this far, I can't stop now. But distance traveled together doesn't guarantee a healthy destination. Emotional investment also blurs perspective because it makes you attach meaning to things that should be neutral. For example, you might look at the years spent together as proof that the relationship must be worth saving, even if most of those years were filled with struggle. You might recall the vacations, the inside jokes, the family gatherings, and let those memories outweigh the nights of tears or the constant anxiety you feel today. It's not that those good moments weren't real, they were. But the existence of good memories doesn't erase the presence of ongoing dysfunction. Emotional investment tricks you into weighting the past heavier than the present. Another dimension of this trap is the way people internalize sacrifice. When you've given up opportunities, endured pain, or compromised your needs for the sake of the relationship, you feel like you have to make it worth it. You think, I can't have gone through all that for nothing, so you keep enduring, keep sacrificing, trying to justify the hardships you've already survived. The problem is, sacrifice doesn't guarantee reward. Sometimes it just keeps you tied to a situation that never deserved that level of sacrifice in the first place. Emotional investment also keeps people stuck because they confuse history with destiny. They think, but we've been through so much together, we've survived so many challenges, and while it's true that shared history can create a strong bond, it can also become a chain. Just because you've survived the storms doesn't mean you should keep living in a climate where it's always raining. A long history together doesn't automatically mean you have a healthy future together. It just means you've shared time, not necessarily growth. The deeper the investment, the harder it becomes to imagine life without that person. Your identity gets wrapped up in the relationship. You don't just think about leaving them. You think about leaving behind a version of yourself that you've been for so long. That's why the grief of ending a long-term bad relationship can feel so intense. You're not just losing a partner, you're losing the story you've been telling yourself about your life. That loss feels unbearable, so people stay convincing themselves that enduring the dysfunction is easier than facing the void of starting over. But here's the truth, emotional investment doesn't mean you owe your future to your past. You can honor the love you gave, the memories you created, and the lessons you learned without chaining yourself to a relationship that no longer serves you. The time you've spent wasn't wasted. It shaped you, it taught you, it helped you grow. But that doesn't mean you have to keep paying into a bank that never gives you returns. Love is not a debt you owe because of the years behind you. It's a choice you make based on the reality in front of you. The danger of letting emotional investment dictate your decisions is that it can lead to decades of settling. People wake up after 20 or 30 years and realize they stayed not because they were happy, because they didn't want to feel like they wasted their earlier years. And in trying to avoid the pain of wasted time, they end up wasting even more. The way to break this cycle is to stop asking, what have I already given? And start asking, what am I still getting? If the answer is pain, neglect, or indifference, then no amount of emotional investment makes staying worth it. At the end of the day, the years you've spent, the love you've given, and the sacrifices you've made are not wasted if you choose to learn from them and move forward. They become wasted only if you let them bind you to a life that doesn't honor who you are now. Emotional investment is powerful, but it doesn't have to be permanent. You can carry the good, release the bad, still choose yourself moving forward.